I'm Jill Finley from Jillily Studio. Today I'm going to teach you how to applique the Jillily Way, which is an applique method that will give you really good results, and you'll have a beautiful applique whether you stitch by hand or by machine. I'll teach you both methods and you're just going to love it. Applique can add so much to your quilt. Look at this quilt, it's got a nice pieced center, but the center, the lines, because they're all pieced, are straight and very graphic. And the applique on this quilt really softens that and adds another texture, another dimension. Here's a block I'm working on. I'm not done with it yet, but I've got all my pieces prepped and glued down, and I've started stitching. But you can see that it's going to allow me to do different things than I would do when I was piecing. So let's set that aside and get ready prepping our pieces. Okay, we're going to start by making our templates. And I make templates using a freezer paper type product. This is a Jillily Studio product called Maker Paper, and it is similar to freezer paper in that it has a plastic coating on one side. The sheets are thicker than freezer paper. They're 3 times thicker, so it'll give you a nice sturdy template that won't fold or bend when you're using it. Okay, so I have 2 sheets of Maker Paper here, and you can see that you can see through it. So I like being able to see through it, so I left the Maker Paper thin enough that you could see through to trace your template that you're trying to make. And then I'll layer 2 layers together because I want it a little heavier, and then press it. I have my iron with no steam so that I don't wrinkle my paper, and then just fuse these together. I placed them on the ironing surface, both with the shiny side facing down. So the shiny side was down, then I pressed them together, and you can see that this Maker Paper is nice. It doesn't wrinkle or pucker. And then once I've got the 2 layers fused together, I just peel it off of my ironing surface. Then I'm going to cut this out. I've already got one cut here, so here's a template ready to go. And here's my little piece of fabric that I want to make this leaf out of. I'm going to place the template on the wrong side of the fabric and press with my iron until it fuses. It's just a few seconds and it's going to fuse to it. Just a temporary bond. Then I cut out around it, using the template as a guide, but cutting about a 1/4 inch away. And this is a generous 1/4 inch. One of the big mistakes that people make when they try this method is to make their seam allowance too small. Make it nice and generous because that makes it easy to turn. And then I have in this little container some spray starch. So just regular old spray starch. You can use any pressing agent and just just spray it into your container. It will foam up if it's got no liquid in it. It's going to foam up because it's got air in it. But the air will fall out and then it'll just look like water, okay? You can use, what do you call that, sizing, or best press, or spray starch. Spray starch is just fine. Then I've got a little starch brush here. This is my Jillily Studio starch brush. And that, because of how the bristles are put together, it holds a lot of liquid and it allows you to paint your seam allowance with that liquid, and that gets just the seam allowance wet. I don't want to wet the template. I've placed it on the outside edge of the seam allowance so that it'll just kind of move into the center as the moisture moves. Then this is my little Jillily Studio Quilter's digit, and what it is an extra finger for you not to get burned. So you place that on the center, take your iron and push this edge right up over, and you see how I'm just kind of easing that fabric up over the edge of the template. Once again, I have no steam on. I'm just going to press without steam because I'm just trying to dry out that starch that's already on the seam allowance. When I have a previously pressed edge, I hold it down with my digit, and then it allows me to press the next edge over so it doesn't unfold it. And then I'm going to press all the way down here. I'm going to hold this edge, see that, and then move this edge up over the template. Now you'll get some little puckers and wrinkles on the inside, but it doesn't matter because that's on the wrong side. Turn it over, press from the top so that you have you've made sure you've dried all of the starch in it. You've got a nice crisp edge. You can see that where we have a sharp point on both ends, I'm going to have a little flag of extra fabric, and that's okay. Don't cut that off. We will tuck that under as we're stitching if we stitch by hand, and if we stitch by machine, we'll tuck it under as we're gluing down when we glue it to our background and make it so that it hides underneath there. Anyway, when this is cooled off, I pull out my template And now I have my prepared piece. See how nice and crisp that fold is? It's going to keep the edge nice and crisp, and I'm ready to apply it to my background. All right, let's do a couple more pieces. This is a different shape. I've already cut it out so that it'll be quicker for us, but I'm just going to press it to the wrong side of the fabric once again. And on this piece, I didn't put, it's got a little bit too much fabric there. I'm going to cut that off. On this piece, I didn't cut out any extra fabric on this edge because I've got a dotted line there, which means that it goes underneath another piece, so I don't need a seam allowance there. So same technique, paint the edge of your seam allowance, just the seam allowance, with your little quilt starch brush, and then using my digit, I turn this edge up over the top of that template. And I just kind of, as you can use your digit to pull the fabric up over tight against the template, so you'll have really good results. On this first edge, when you have a point, make sure you don't just end right here at the point of the template, but press all the way down that edge. Continue that fold all the way down, okay? And then I'll turn it around and do the other side. I'm going to hold that down and press this side over and move my, as I move my iron around, I'll get that side. It's very quick and easy. Set that aside. Here's a little circle, kind of a circle. It's a little oval that's going to be the center of our flower. I'm going to paint the seam allowance once again, and then take it to my iron and start pressing that edge up over. Now on circles or circular things, it's nice to be able to move around the edge and see how I can grab this with my digit and just tuck it under my iron. So as I'm moving around this circular edge here, I'm going to pull and tuck underneath my iron. And I like using a big iron because a big iron is hot. A lot of people do this method and they use a little craft iron. And I found that for me, that's not as efficient because it takes longer, because I have a lot of surface area here. So I can dry that starch out really quick. So I can get that starch to dry, and I have a hot iron and it's heavy. So it does the job, does all the work for me, and I don't have to be pushing really hard with a little tiny craft iron. So now you can see how smooth that edge is, and all my raw edges are tucked underneath the other side. I'm going to pull out the template, and I can reuse that template about, 5 or 6 times, maybe even more. And now my pieces are ready, and let's get ready to glue them down. Let's pull in I forgot to take the template out of this one. Got some pieces here prepared. So I'm going to look at what I'm going to make here, a little flower. I've got a leaf, we'll add that later. But you see how these are going to go underneath another piece, so I didn't need to have a folded edge on that side. So let's prep these pieces and base them down. And this is where I use Applique glue. Applique glue is a Jillily Studio product. It's archival quality, acid-free, pH neutral. It comes with a little taper tip that you screw on. There's a whole video on my website that will tell you more about the glue. And this time we're just getting ready to apply it and get our pieces prepped. So I'm going to put a little dot of glue in the seam allowance of my prepared piece and glue it down. I put the glue just in the seam allowance. I don't want to glue down the center of the piece because I want the center of my applique piece to be free floating. Whoops, dropped it. I want it to be able to kind of puff up. I don't want it attached. I want it to have some ability to kind of puff up as I'm stitching. So I'm going to glue down all my pieces, and I put the glue about 1.5 inches, or I mean an inch to 1/2 inch. I'm going to pull that up, stick this under. In the seam allowance, about every 1/2 inch to inch. And you notice wherever I have a flag of extra fabric, like by this point, I don't put any glue there because I'm going to stitch that down. I'm going to need to be able to tuck it underneath as I'm stitching. So I'm going to leave that up. Now if I was machine stitching, and I do have a video tutorial that teaches you how to do this by machine, I would do the very same thing, prep the pieces the very same way, but I would tuck the edges underneath. I would put a little dot of glue right here and tuck that little flag underneath, glue it down, so that when I go to the machine, I'm ready to stitch. But if I'm stitching by hand, I leave the flag sticking out, and the stitching video will show you how to do that. But can you see how I can glue down everything in my block at once? Okay, so now you've learned how to do Applique the Jillily Way to prep your pieces so that all your raw edges are on the inside and you'll have beautiful results on your applique pieces. I just wanted to remind you about some of the tools that we used. Jillily Studio Maker Paper to create your templates. I do have a little kit, applique set from Jillily Studio that comes in this cute little tin, and it has all of the tools that I used in my demo today. So it has applique glue, which we basted everything down with, the quilter's digit, that's this little item right here that we use to pull the fabric up over the template so that you don't get burned, and of course the starch brush. And then we didn't talk about the polka dots, and polka dots, just briefly, are a little sticky thimble. Let me pop one out here. And you stick it on the end of your finger when you're hand sewing. Wherever you push the back of your needle, this allows you to stitch without getting poked. So polka dots are in my set, and also Bowen needles, my favorite hand sewing needle. And there's more information about the applique kit on another tutorial video as well. Thanks for visiting me today, and I hope you learned a lot about applique, and you'll have some good results with that.